Welcome to the Fantasy Football Forge. My name is Steve, and today we have hopefully an exciting episode. We're going to look at zero RB strategy. We're going to look at hero RB strategy. We're going to pit the two against each other at the end of the day. But before that, we're going to go through a few things. So let me just kind of go through the structure of this video. First off, we're going to look at a few tools that I came up with recently. And I used some of them while I did some of these mock drafts for this video to help along. I would really like your feedback on if you find any of them, if you think they would be helpful, and then I can just keep them up to date up on the website. So we'll run over those tools briefly, might touch upon them throughout the video a little bit. Then we get to the meat of the video, starting off the divisional round for the early position, the mid position, and the late position draft spots. I drafted from 3 spots for each, so I picked from the first pick of the draft, 3rd pick, 4th pick, 5th pick, 7th pick, 8th pick, and then 9th pick, 11th pick, and 12th pick, going zero RB strategy, hero RB strategy. For instance, 1st pick, 3rd pick, 4th pick the one that I think is the best from them to represent the early round in the conference championship, where we will see an early rounder, a mid rounder, and a late rounder from, for instance, the hero running back strategy face off to ultimately bring us to a zero RB team versus a hero RB team, and to see which one wins the bout, what's the best strategy, and from where in the draft. Is it going to be the easiest to pull that strategy off, or have the best in this sample set, where do we get the best results? And I am going to stress that right here, so I hopefully don't bring that up too many more times. This is a sample set that we're working from. There's a lot of different results that you could end up with at the end of the day. The format will be, I'm going to go through the early round hero running backs, then the early round zero running backs, and then we're going to look at just the whole group and compare and contrast them to each other very briefly. And then we'll get back to looking at the mid rounds, the same thing, late rounds, same thing, and then we'll kind of go through the end of this little mini bracket that I have set up. What I want you to get from this is just ultimately, would you feel comfortable I don't think it's ever smart to go into a draft with a single strategy in mind, but it's good to be prepared to go those routes. And in this way, you can see, would I be comfortable if I'm put in a place where my league mates are just giving me the best wide receivers, a quarterback falls, and I'm sitting there and it's 3rd round or so, I don't know, 4th round, I feel like I need a running back. Am I going to feel comfortable waiting another round or two before I take a running back? Maybe you would. We'll see. There's plenty to this video, so let's just dig right into this video, starting off with some of those quick tools that I want to look at. So as you can see, I've titled this sheet ADP Hotspots, and it really starts here for all of these tools, which is I went through, got the ADPs of each player at each position, tied it to what round that ADP would represent, 1st round, 2nd round. This is based on 12-team leagues. Everything here in this video also is based on the most common format for fantasy football. I'll get to the settings before we actually start looking at the draft results. But here you can see in the 1st round, 6 wide receivers go. And then I have this heat mapped so that way you can see when like an average amount, low amount of each position are going. During the draft, this wasn't necessarily a useful tool. Looked at it a couple of times, but for the most part, I just like it pre-draft, understanding where positions are currently going heavily in the draft, having that basic knowledge, which is good to know. I think for me, the biggest surprise, or maybe not even surprise, but good thing to know were these running backs. I felt like quarterbacks, it's pretty obvious where those hot spots have been so far. Wide receivers is definitely, this is no surprise right here. But other than that, I thought most of this was pretty obvious. Tight end found that a little bit interesting back in the 12th round. And so this sheet is not a whole lot different than this sheet, except I went through and I kind of looked, preparing for the next round, where am I going to want to attack at a position before it starts to, this tier or whatnot starts to get depleted, or at what points can I say, you know what, I don't necessarily need to attack that position. For instance, in the 6th round for wide receivers, and I will say this chart here works the best if you're drafting towards the end of the rounds, I would say in general. But at the 6th round for the wide receiver here, there's only going to be 3 wide receivers going in the 7th round. So, you know, if there's 5 wide receivers at this pick that I think are all right, and there's a couple of running backs that I really have my eyes on, which one should I go for? Well, the wide receiver has a higher chance of making it back around to me. And the 8th round, the running back is about to have a run going on it, so I'll probably attack the running back position. If this tool goes up on the website, and if you use it, then just remember all of these are a round ahead. I would think of yellow as like less than average. Orange as it's starting to really slow down as far as the amount of that position that's going to be taken compared to most rounds. And red means that it's really going to, you know, you don't have to worry too much about that position getting depleted. And then on the opposite side, the lightest of greens would be, you know, above average. Traffic is moderately heavy. Darker green, traffic is heavy. And then the blue, traffic is very, very heavy at that position coming up. Where I found this helpful in drafts, for instance, let's say we're in round 5 and we're looking at the wide receivers, the running backs, the quarterbacks. We kind of need each of them. Well, as you can see, if we were to get our wide receiver that we want right now, follow that up in round 6 with a running back, and then follow that up in round 7 with a quarterback, we're staying ahead of the curve in that sense, and we're going to get hopefully the guys that we want. Obviously, stay liquid. These are just guidelines when you're maybe looking at 2 positions, and you can look ahead even a little bit more at some positions, but it just gives you an idea of when you could start to attack at these positions to get ahead of the curve. The next tool that I would like to look at is the hot spots by draft position. This is the one where I was the least sure about this being at all useful or helpful in draft or even outside of draft, but it ended up being very helpful in draft and just looking pre-draft at if you want to kind of develop a strategy pre-draft. Gives you a good idea of where you might end up finding players that you would like. So this is the hotspots by draft position, meaning the quarterback for if you have an early draft position, picks 1 through 4, the 2nd round, there's going to be 2 quarterbacks that you might be interested in that on average players of fantasy football are interested in and draft players from. And so I found this little heat map to be very useful in draft when I'm sitting there. Maybe a tight end is tantalizing me in the 4th or 5th round here. It's like, oh, but look at that. Like, there's going to be tight ends that people found to be worth drafting here in these next few rounds. Right now, if there's a couple of running backs that I have interest in, I should probably be looking at those, or maybe I should really be looking at those because there might not be running backs that I'm really too interested in coming up shortly. I also use this for planning for each of these early, mid, late round draft picks for the zero and the hero running back drafts that we're going to go through. So anyways, I don't know if I explained this tool well enough, but in the draft, once again, I really did find it useful when I'm sitting there looking at, do I want to go a wide receiver or tight end at this next pick? Well, hey, look, we're going to get some wide receivers that, once again, commonly are drafted around my next couple of picks in the 4th and the 5th round, whereas typically in this 4th round area, there's not a tight end that anybody would be interested in, but right now this tight end that I'm clearly debating upon has been potentially pretty commonly taken here. So it was helpful, not perfect, but far from imperfect. I was surprised at how much accuracy, I suppose, it had when I was making decisions between a couple of positions and really defaulted to this. And then it kind of came true, whereas like, oh, there is a lot of wide receivers between the 8th and 9th round when I was picking from the 9th to 12th picks that were pretty good looking guys for that area of the draft. So with that out of the way, let's get to the meat of this video, which is going to be the drafts. And so here are the settings that I did: 1 quarterback, 2 running back, 2 wide receiver, 1 tight end, 1 flex wide receiver, running back / tight end, 6 bench spots, no DST, no kicker. So this is 13 rounds. Going through round 13, if you look at the amount of DSTs, the 2 DSTs normally get drafted via ADP in the 12th and the 13th round. So I don't really feel like that threw the results off by very much at all by eliminating them from this draft. And then down here, I did all experts, composite ADP, and Yahoo, ESPN, NFL pre-draft rankings. Those rankings are going to definitely influence the results of your draft if you're drafting online. The ADP is going to be, over the next month or two, is going to be more resembling of some of these pre-draft rankings of all experts rankings compared to right now with the best ball ADPs. I think are heavily influencing the ADP. For instance, the quarterback position really seems to be going earlier than most years. And so I'm hoping that by not just going by ADP, this video's information will be more representative as time goes along here and as ADPs come maybe more in line with rankings than they currently, I believe, are. And here we are at the meat of this episode, starting off with the early round hero running back strategy picks that I made from pick number 1, pick number 3, and pick number 4. One of the observations that I made while picking from these spots is that I felt that you were very much safe to pick a running back in the late second round, so around with your next pick in the second round. If you're not strictly going for hero running back, you can start really strong with 2 running backs. For instance, Christian McCaffrey and Najee Harris or Ramondre Stevenson. I think that that's an excellent start to a draft. I would have absolutely no qualms with that. That being said, with how the draft is currently going, I don't think that it's wisest to take a running back in the first round currently. And so, with these 3 drafts, there were 2 big differences in strategy that I think you will be able to notice, and that's at the quarterback position. With pick 1, I went early, got Patrick Mahomes. The gains that I really felt from that compared to the other rosters came down once we get to the bench with Christian Kirk and Deontay Johnson as my first 2 bench flex guys. That's, I think, very strong compared to the other 2 benches that you would see at picks 3 and 4. But with picks 3 and 4, I waited a little bit later, not super late, at the quarterback position. Got Trevor Lawrence, Justin Fields. And for me, the gains from that was that I ended up being stronger at the flex position. Amari Cooper, Keenan Allen over Terry McLaurin. Now, a lot of the times, most of the time, this is not a perfect science experiment, so not always. When I'm saying these things about a pick being stronger or a position being stronger, I'm generally referring to based on ADP. Back to what I was saying about picks 3 and 4, the gains from waiting at the quarterback position were that I felt that flex position is stronger, as well as at the running back too, Rachaad White and DeAndre Swift, compared to Samaje Perine. The other big difference in strategy that you may notice is that I went with a first-round wide receiver in 2 of these, pick 1 and pick 3, Justin Jefferson, Ja'Marr Chase, respectively. And I went with a first-round running back at pick 4, Austin Ekeler. This is where, once again, I'm just going to repeat, I think I ended up liking the rosters generally better by going wide receiver first. One interesting thing of note is that you will not see me go 2 tight ends too often for redraft purposes, and I found it very interesting that I do believe these are the only 2 rosters that I ended up taking 2 tight ends with, pick 3 and pick 4 for the early hero running back strategy. And something dually interesting with that is that if you look at tight end, is this group right down here, and if you look at the tight ends for the early round picks, right near the end of the draft, does tend to be a hotspot for tight ends compared to at other positions. Once again, these are ADPs, and there is some variance, so at the end of the day, keep that in mind with these results. But on average, there would be a tight end taken, 2 of them taken, really, from these 1 through 4 picks. So there is just something about the running backs, wide receivers maybe that are available around this spot, and the tight ends that happen to still be available that ends up resulting in these tight ends looking a little bit better than not. if you have an early round pick. So if it wasn't clear, pick 4 is my clear-cut least favorite of this lineup. So let's look at pick 1 versus pick 3. And I think that pick 1 has the most upside of these two rosters, whereas pick 3, I would feel the most comfortable with that roster. But does the upside outweigh the comfort, the upside of pick 1? And I think it does. I'm going to go with pick 1 as the early round winner. What I love about this roster are that Christian Kirk, Deontay Johnson depth, along with just the strength. It's I think a really strong overall roster. One thing I will note too, while we're looking at this real quick, in general, these later round running backs especially, I'm just picking through a group of like 10, 11, 12 or so of them that I think are best for hero running back and zero running back purposes. Guys with ultimate upside if a starter goes down, who are the teams that you would most want the next man up for, take that kind of guy. Or in some instances, like a Devin Singletary is going to be in cases where I feel a little bit more comfortable with these starting running backs that I got. So pick 3, you can see with Ramondre Stevenson, Rachaad White, felt fairly strong there. So Devin Singletary, I think, gets you a nice floor. And if Dameon Pierce gets injured, there is some upside to that anyways. But I think Devin Singletary is going to be a good emergency back to have on a team. I think he'll get some good receiving work on that team. I think it's time now to look at the early round, the 0 running back rosters, once again from picks 1, 3, and 4. We're going to start off with pick 4, where you will notice Justin Jefferson fell to me at pick 4, which I would never expect to happen in a draft. So I followed that up with the receivers A.J. Brown, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and Keenan Allen. All 4 of them with my first 4 picks. All 4 of them have different bye weeks. So with that roster, I figured I would just shotgun the running back position, and I have the flexibility to drop some of those guys if they don't work out as I work the waiver wire. So we compare pick 4 to pick 1, and it is close for me. But pick 4 edges out pick 1 in a few areas, and I like the extra stab that I got at running back with pick 4. Just gave me all the more opportunities to hopefully improve those running backs. I know I'll never need a running back in that flex spot, so just going to churn and burn and hopefully make this into an elite roster by the time that it needs to be. Until then, James Cook, A.J. Dillon, Samaje Perine, especially early season, should be able to hold down the fort. So I liked pick 4 a little bit more than pick 1, just kind of edges it out. It doesn't hurt when guys like Justin Jefferson fall to you at pick 4. Now we compare pick 1 to pick 3, and I think that pick 1 probably would have beaten pick 3, which makes it easy. Ultimately, pick 4 is going to win the early round 0 running back strategy. Going back quickly to pick 3 versus pick 1, pick 3 is better at the running back position, at the tight end position, but that is about it. And I don't think that the pick of Zay Jones really does much for the team without an injury to another receiver on the Jaguars. So to me, from this early position of the draft, it really worked out to go all out for the wide receiver position and then just grab as many running backs as I could. And so now we're going to look at the early 0 running back strategy versus the early hero running back strategy, early round strategies for each. If it is not clear from this quickly last second put together visual, hero running back rosters are up on the top, 0 running back rosters are on the bottom. Once again, this is not a perfect science experiment, but tried to look at each of these 3 as a whole and make some comparisons and some contrasts from between the 2. On the whole, I felt that the tight ends and the quarterback strength was about equal for both the hero and the 0 running back strategies from the early position. Hero running back not only had a big advantage with their RB1, but interestingly also at the RB2 spot. That being said, the 0 running back strategy had a significant advantage at the wide receiver 2 and the flex spots. To me, for 2 wide receiver leagues, I think that it's a matter of preference between the 2. But for 3 wide receiver leagues, I think that it is easier to build a stronger roster if you go 0 running back. On the whole, I like the 0 running back rosters if I'm going 3 wide receiver better. However, I think the single best roster, if I had to take one of these rosters for a 3 wide receiver league, would have been pick 1 for the hero running back strategy. And so the biggest difference here with that number 1 pick from the hero spot was taking Patrick Mahomes early, where I really got some good depth being able to focus on some of those mid-round wide receivers instead of popping off and taking a quarterback around that spot, because there is some good depth at the wide receiver position even with how much they're popping off early in the draft. And that is going to bring us to the mid-round hero running back rosters from pick 5, pick 7, and pick 8. Starting off with pick 8, that's not really a hero running back roster. I wanted to not go with a higher end quarterback again like I did with pick 5 and 7, Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts respectively. And it really only made sense to go with Jahmyr Gibbs there in the 4th round. Tight ends were a bit of a reach at that point, a definite reach where it just didn't make sense to go there. The wide receivers just weren't as juicy as Jahmyr Gibbs. So if you intend to take one of the top 3 or 4 quarterbacks from this mid position of the draft, I think that hero running back works very, very nicely. If you're specifically going to try and build a hero running back roster going into your draft, waiting longer on the quarterback is not necessarily going to work out with how the quarterbacks were going in these mock drafts that I did up on Fantasy Pros website. Of note, the quarterbacks, Jalen Hurts went in the 4th round, comparing him versus Lamar in the 5th round versus Justin Fields in the 6th round. Season long, I have Hurts ranked as my QB number 1, but on a week in and week out basis, if I have Lamar Jackson or Justin Fields going up against Jalen Hurts in any given week, I like my chances to at least match his score. And when I say match, I mean be within plus or minus 2.5 points, which is why I generally prefer to just wait at the quarterback position like I did with pick 8 here. Now, looking at the strategies implemented here, I think there was one big difference in the strategies, and that is that we're going to see a tight end versus a wide receiver versus running back going in the 1st round. Each of these rosters, I took one of those different positions in the 1st round. With pick 7, I went tight end early, and I also took quarterback the earliest of the bunch, and I felt that I was clearly not able to make up for going off and getting those onesie positions with my starters at the wide receiver, the running back, or the flex position. Additionally, I actually like that bench the least out of the bunch here, so it's pretty clear that pick 7 is not my favorite out of this group. With pick 5, I went running back with my first pick of the draft, and I actually prefer Nick Chubb, who I took with pick 8, more than Bijan Robinson. So for me, it wasn't worth going running back in the 1st round, but most would disagree with me on that, and that's why when I was making these selections, I wasn't picking based off of my own personal draft board. I, for the most part, was taking the highest ADP at the position that I thought I should be taking at that point in the draft. Then when we look at pick 8, that's the roster where I went wide receiver first with Cooper Kupp. And I feel that I got the best starting roster at pick 8. Pick 5 has a clearly better bench in my opinion, but the starters pick 8 bar none. Additionally, personally, I wouldn't draft Juwan Johnson if I pushed off the tight end position like I did here past the top 13 tight ends, which is really where I want to stick within. I would focus on getting one of the better DSTs and or kickers, assuming that I must draft a kicker in my draft, and I'll take a super upside tight end with one of my last picks. The last 2 times that I have done this, I got the tight end number 2 on the season in Mark Andrews, his sophomore season, and prior to that, with the tight end number 5 on the season with Jared Cook in his 2nd season with the Raiders. I like to think that I'm pretty good at recognizing late round tight end talent. If nothing else, I've had good luck with it in the past. My bet this year is on Greg Dulcich, so wink wink, keep that in mind. At least currently he goes, I think, much later than he should be going. Ultimately, between picks 5 and 8, it is very close. And much like with pick 1, I think that pick 5 has the higher upside. That said, I would choose pick 8, except I don't think that I really went hero running back strategy when I took Jahmyr Gibbs in the 4th round, so pick 8 is disqualified for cheating, and pick 5 will represent the mid-round picks for best spot to draft in hero running back strategy from the mid-round draft spot. And that will bring us to the mid-round 0 running back strategy, where I once again took from picks 5, 7, and 8. One thing that you will notice with this group is the tight end group. I ended up going fairly early across each of the picks, at pick 5, at 7, at 8. And somewhat interesting, if we go look at the hotspot by draft position, the mid-round picks right here, tight end, it does have one getting taken in the 1st round, one getting taken in the 4th round. You compare that to early rounders, none taken there. Compare that to the late round positions. It's not until the 3rd and the 5th round where there tends to be a couple of tight ends taken. So the early tight ends, I don't think is a big surprise for the mid-round spot when you're utilizing a 0 running back strategy especially. First of all, we're going to look at picks 5 and 7 because I took Patrick Mahomes with each of them, so let's compare those two. With pick 7, I went all out and I stacked Travis Kelce with Patrick Mahomes. How did that impact the receiver depth in comparison to waiting a little bit longer for a guy like George Kittle at the tight end spot, 1st round compared to, I don't know what that is, 4th roundish maybe? In regards to depth, pick 7 recovered by the flex position from taking those too early. However, pick 5 obviously beats it out at the top end with Ja'Marr Chase and Jaylen Waddle versus Devonta Smith and Amari Cooper. The running backs for those teams are very close, but in favor of pick 5 by a little bit. The thing is I can't really push this bench forward from pick 5, so I'm going to give it to pick 7. That said, it's not like pick 5 has a clear-cut, better starting roster. I think it is better, but that advantage that you get from Travis Kelce, depending on what your thoughts are on George Kittle, I think is that enough to overcome the difference between Ja'Marr Chase, Devonta Smith, Jaylen Waddle, Amari Cooper. Your call on that. Very close for these two rosters. I do want to point out players like Ezekiel Elliott, Leonard Fournette, Kareem Hunt are waiting on teams to have a situation arise like what happened with Baltimore last season and then be brought onto a team and hopefully for your 0 RB team get a very good opportunity to be studs for you that you were able to get for very little cost in the draft. We're looking for upside from these running backs. As I noted earlier, there's just going to be a group of running backs that ultimately could be fairly interchangeable from one roster to a next. So especially for these 0 running back rosters, I end up taking these bench spots into account for which team I'm picking a little bit less. So if you remember, pick 7 won that little head-to-head matchup. So we're going to pit pick 7 up against pick 8. I think the advantage pick 8 gained at both wide receiver spots is enough to overcome the advantage that pick 7 has at tight end with Travis Kelce. And I'm calling most other things on these rosters a draw. And don't forget, the bench, we're really not pitting them together against each other too much. For instance, at running back, I would take Chase Brown with my last running back pick if I was going 0 hero running back strategy. Almost any strategy, I'll be happy to take Chase Brown as late as I'm able to successfully get him. I want him on my rosters. But I didn't take him on every single roster here because I would just be way too repetitive. So for me, between rosters 7 and 8, all these rosters very similar in my opinion, all in all, but I like roster number 8 the most, so that's the one that I picked. I will say, here's where you'll see I wasn't taking guys that I would pick. DK Metcalf, George Pickens, there were other wide receivers that I 100% would have taken over them. I really don't like that portion of the roster, but the ADP on them said that most people would have liked them there. So taking that into account here for pick 8. And that brings us to the mid-round 0 RB strategy versus taking a mid-round pick hero RB strategy. And on the whole, 0 had the advantage at both quarterback and tight end. Definitely, look at that, 2 Patrick Mahomes, 1 Jalen Hurts versus Lamar Jackson, Justin Fields, and Jalen Hurts obviously has the advantage there. Tight ends, I'll let you look at those. outside of pick 8 for the hero running backs, where I took Jahmyr Gibbs in the 4th round, there was no advantage at all for the hero running backs against the zero running backs. A.J. Dillon, Javonte Williams, I have back-to-back in my rankings, and you can see I happened to get them in just every other roster except for that 8th pick in the where I took Jahmyr Gibbs on all of those rosters. So really no difference between those two, and so no advantage gained by going hero running back at the RB2 spot. Zero only narrowly beats out the hero running back strategy at the wide receiver 1 spot, at the wide receiver 2 spot, and at the flex spot, but does narrowly beat them out at all of those spots. For 2 wide receiver leagues, I think that zero running back strategy held the clear edge over hero running back strategy for the starting rosters. However, due to having to find running backs, while there is still some very solid wide receiver talent on the board, for 3 wide receiver leagues, I think that hero running back clearly outshined zero by the time that you arrive to the wide receiver 5, if not the wide receiver 4s on those rosters. And I'm a big def guy, so I would go hero running back for 3 wide receiver leagues, surprisingly, from the mid position, zero running back for 2 wide receiver leagues. Now let's get on to... And here we are with the late round hero running back picks from pick 9, 11, and 12. And a couple of the differences in the strategies that you will see here are going to be early quarterback, pick 12, versus later quarterback with Tua, with picks 9 and 11. The other difference in the strategy would be early, pick 9, versus early mid, pick 12, versus late, pick 11, tight ends. So pick 11... took Greg Dulcich, obviously quite late. TJ Hawkinson, number 4, I think, tight end off of the board. Travis Kelce, a first rounder. One thing that I did note with pick 12, taking TJ Hawkinson, when it came to the turn around picks 9 and 10, I really regretted taking TJ Hawkinson. I'm looking at the tight ends there, and I'm like, those are the best guys on the board right now. Whereas TJ Hawkinson I don't think he would have been the best guy on the board at that point. So, and I think that shows with the flex spot there being A.J. Dillon with pick 12. I did not like that and regretted it. First, we're going to compare picks 9 and pick 11. The main question here will be, does Travis Kelce, pick 9, offset the advantage gained at running back and more so at the wide receiver and flex positions from that I got with pick 11 by not taking such an early tight end and by actually waiting on the tight end spot? In regards to the advantage gained at the running back position, as you will see, I was able to get the same RB2 in James Conner for both of those rosters. And as far as the RB1 goes, I have Nick Chubb ranked higher than I do Tony Pollard, but it's not some sort of clear-cut advantage. However, the trio of Stephon Diggs, Chris Olave, and Keenan Allen that I have on pick 11 is clearly stronger than the trio of Devonta Smith, DK Metcalf, and Christian Watson. For me, the answer to that question is no. Travis Kelce does not offset the other advantages found when I waited at the tight end spot for pick 11. Pick 11 is definitely stronger at the RB3 spot, whereas pick 9 basically ended up going with a zero running back style of drafting while they bolstered their wide receiver depth. And even with that, the wide receiver depth is barely better than the depth at pick 11. So the depth for pick 9 does not overcome the starting roster for pick 11. Pick 11 is the clear winner between these two. Let's compare pick 11 versus pick 12. Both rosters have Nick Chubb, James Conner, and Stephon Diggs featured on them, so that helps to make this comparison easy. Did going with Jalen Hurts and TJ Hawkinson hurt pick 12? It does at wide receiver 2 and at the flex spot, which personally I would prefer to have an advantage at compared to the quarterback and the tight end spots. Quarterback provides the least advantage on a weekly basis against opposing quarterbacks per week. And the tight end is the most inconsistent position there is to get those big games from them, even though they are very valuable when you get them. It comes down to the bench depth here, and I would take pick 11. It's close, but I think the choice of TJ Hawkinson is the losing factor for pick 12. Pick 11 is going to win the late round hero running back strategy representation in the conference championship finals versus, I think it is 4 and 8. Moral of the story here is it's not worth going for one of the top tight ends with the late round pick. Travis Kelce, TJ Hawkinson, I think got outshone by pick 11 just being the best roster here. And that's going to bring us to the late round 0 running back strategy picks, where I picked once again from pick 9, 11, and 12. Let's start off with picks 9 and 11, where I have Stefon Diggs on both of those rosters. With pick 9, I went earlier at the quarterback position and at the tight end position. What does that do to the wide receivers, running backs, and the flex guys is the question. It's not noticeable for the running backs until you get into those depth pieces. As far as the wide receivers and the flex spot goes, or even if you want to include the depth, the guys who will most likely fill in at my flex position, well, it is close. But I like CeeDee Lamb, who is on pick 11, more than Davante Adams by 1 spot. So that later position helped to secure a slightly stronger wide receiver 2. In terms of depth at the wide receiver / my flex spot, I prefer pick 11, but pick 9's Terry McLaurin is the strongest of the 4 bench receivers, being Terry McLaurin and Jameson Williams for that roster, and then DK Metcalf, Jahan Dotson. However, the grouping of Terry McLaurin, he doesn't hold enough of an advantage over DK Metcalf and Jahan Dotson that pairing him with Jameson Williams doesn't overcome that. And so let's pit pick 11, my winner of that battle, versus pick 12 now. And I think that pick 11 can compete at quarterback and the tight end spots on a week in and week out basis and is otherwise stronger. With pick 12, it appears that I took the 4 wide receiver strategy again, which becomes obvious when you look at the RB2 on this team, Brian Robinson Jr. That said, B-Rob could way outproduce his ADP. Not that I think he's being drafted too low. I just think that it is very much possible. I'm going to call it a wash at the quarterback position, but I do prefer Trevor Lawrence by a little ways. Does pick 12's running back depth overcome a clear advantage for pick 11? I would say, much like Brian Robinson, it could, but it is risky. As far as the wide receivers go, top 4 wide receivers, I'll take pick 12. Pick 12 doesn't have a 5th wide receiver anyways. The big thing that I would change about the roster for pick 12 is the tight end spot. I think that I can do just as good or better than TJ Hawkinson later in the draft, make that a running back and take Trevor instead of Justin Herbert, and I love the upside of pick 12's roster. In week 1, pick 11 is probably going to win this matchup, but by week 8, I think that pick 12 could very well have the better roster. I'm going to pick 12 to represent the late round 0 running backs in what I think may be an upset here from this group. Let me know if I got that wrong. And that brings us to the comparison and contrast of the late round 0 running back rosters versus the late round hero running back rosters. On the whole, the 0 running back rosters had the advantage at quarterback, but the tight ends are basically a draw between the two groups. This was the biggest advantage at the running back position that the hero running back found out of drafting from any of the other positions, out of the 3 spots that we're looking at. Surprisingly, the wide receiver 1 spot is a draw. Similar to the early round picks, the advantage for 0 running back strategy grew more and more significant at the wide receiver 2 spot and at the flex spots for the 0 running back strategy. Where with the early round picks, I thought that it was a matter of preference for a 2 wide receiver league, I felt that the hero running back strategy had a higher floor and a close enough ceiling that I would pick hero running back as my clear-cut winner as the stronger strategy from a late position in the draft. For 3 wide receiver leagues, I stated for the early round picks from an early round pick that it was quote-unquote easier to build a stronger roster going 0 running back. I do think that that increased advantage found at the running back spots here, in this case for the hero running backs, offsets things enough that I would cautiously state that hero running back is also the better strategy from late position. The hero rosters just feel much more prepared for a rash of injuries through their benches to me when comparing those three versus these 3-0 rosters. So, looks like hero in both cases, 2 wide receiver and 3 wide receiver from the late round draft position. And now it's time to declare a winner out of the early, mid, or late round draft positions for the hero running back strategy. Right off of the bat, picks 1 and 5 have similar roster makeups, so we'll compare those two. In both cases, I took 4 late shots at the running backs to hopefully overtake the RB2 spot with a stud thanks to an injury or a surprise. Out of the two, I would argue that pick 1 has more upside, even though I like pick 5's group a little bit better. With pick 1, you're going to feel safer with Patrick Mahomes, of course, but if Lamar Jackson stays healthy, he should be a stud for team pick 5. Still, advantage goes to pick 1 there. Same with at the wide receiver 1 spot and at the tight end spot for pick 1. Other than that, pick 5 has the advantage at both of the running back spots, wide receiver 2 spot, and at the flex spot. Even if you don't like Keenan Allen more than Terry McLaurin, I think that you could call it a draw when you compare Christian Watson versus Deontay Johnson, because as you see, both of those rosters got Christian Kirk on their bench as well. It's definitely close here, but if I had to bet on one of these rosters to do better, I would take pick 5, which brings us to pitting pick 5 against pick 11, which are much more different in their builds. Obviously, Lamar Jackson's going to have the edge over Tua at the quarterback spot, and I'm going to call it a draw at the RB1 spot between Bijan and Chubb. That's just a me thing. I think that James Conner is a dream target for hero and zero running back strategies based on his current ADP, so he's going to get the edge over A.J. Dillon for pick 11 there. And I literally have A.J. Brown 1 spot ahead of Stephon Diggs and Jalen Waddle 1 spot ahead of Chris Olave. At the tight end spot, the ADP says that Dalton Schultz is the better option, but I would much rather have Greg Dulcich. So we're going to call that one a draw, and the flex spot is the same. It's a draw, so it comes down to the benches. How much did pick 5 lose out by taking a higher quarterback and a higher tight end? And for the first time, I think, I would say, not much. In fact, I like that bench more. To quick recap the starting rosters, pick 5 holds a slight advantage at quarterback, the spot that I think is the least important to have an advantage at on a weekly basis, and pick 11 holds an advantage at the RB2 spot and overall for the wide receivers, which probably becomes a draw once you factor in the benches anyways. My issue with pick 11's bench is just that I would have taken a different wide receiver over George Pickens and Zay Flowers at those picks. I think that I would bet on pick 11 in a head-to-head matchup when both teams are at full health. But I think that pick 5 is built better to withstand the trials and tribulations of a season of injuries, etc. You play the game to win a championship, so I'm going to go against my brain here, which is pulling for pick 11, and I'm going to go with my gut, which is pulling for pick 5. Pick 5 is the winner, going to win the conference championship here for the hero running back strategy from the mid-round drafting position. I think that the primary lesson for the hero running back strategy is that if you find yourself taking one running back and in position that you may get 3 wide receivers in the top 4 picks, generally there is no need to rush getting one of the top 3 quarterbacks off of the board, and the same can be said for the tight end position. And now it's time to crown the championship for the zero running back strategy here between pick 4, pick 8, and pick 12. And I went with a similar strategy for both picks 4 and pick 12, so let's compare those two first. Well, I didn't think that the winner would go this way between these two, nor did I think that it would be this clear-cut. Pick 4 has the advantage at quarterback, at RB2, at the wide receiver 1, and at the flex spot, including Keenan Allen over Christian Watson on the bench. Pick 12 only received an advantage at the tight end spot, which once again isn't one that I care to attack anyways in TJ Hawkinson. So it is between picks 4 and 8. Visually, it's very close, but when I run the numbers, pick 8 has many more advantages at the quarterback one, at the RB1, and at the tight end versus the only advantage for pick 4 being at the flex spot. I have Justin Jefferson and Tyreek Hill back-to-back in my rankings. Same with A.J. Brown and CeeDee Lamb, so called that a draw. I still have these same issues that I had before with pick 8, being DK Metcalf and George Pickens. Personally, not guys that I would take, but it's going to be the winner out of this group. That team feels a little less consistent, but when you include the 5th wide receiver on the bench, it just feels a little better prepared on day 1 to make a run at a championship than pick 4 does, which is ultra impressive because I feel like several guys had to fall in the draft for pick 4 in order to get that roster. So that was a very strong roster, but ultimately when comparing them, that having that 5th wide receiver makes you feel a little more comfortable, that's for sure, and it's just enough with the other advantages from pick 8 over pick 4 that that's my winner here for the 0 running back strategy from the middle position of the draft. And so that brings us to our Super Bowl between the 0 running back strategy and the hero running back strategy. Which one would you go? Let me know in the comments because I don't know that I have a direct answer for you here. Now here you can see a little bit ago I commented on like when I ran the numbers, and this is what I meant by running the numbers. I did this for pretty much every matchup. It wasn't always the determining factor, but it did help me to make the decision and basically went based on ADP, who gets the check mark here. In some situations, I overruled ADP with my personal feelings. Once again, this wasn't some sort of science experiment, but I did try to keep it pretty darn fair across and just look at different roster makeups and whatnot and compare and contrast them and pick which one not only that I felt was the winner, but also that the average drafter would think was the winner based on where they're taking these guys. So you can see the 0 running back roster has the advantage at the quarterback spot. Jalen Hurts over Lamar Jackson also has the advantage at the wide receiver 1 spot, the wide receiver 2 spot, and at the tight end spot. Whereas the hero running back only got the advantage at the running back spot and at the flex spot. Going to call A.J. Dillon, Javonte Williams a draw there. But then got a big advantage with Christian Watson and Christian Kirk on the bench there. And you might remember me talking about that roster. I really love those two. I thought that was a great get for that roster. So the starting roster is stronger here for the 0 running back strategy, but the depth is going to be the winner for the hero running back strategy. So I really think it's just a matter of which do you prefer. And although it's very, very tempting to take the Tyreek Hill, CeeDee Lamb, Kyle Pitts for Jalen Hurts combo there for the 0 running back roster, when it comes down to it, if I had to take one of these rosters into a season, and I would probably swap out Tyjae Spears for Chase Brown there, I would go with the hero running back roster. I feel a little bit more prepared to leave the best wide receiver on my bench every week instead of putting them into my flex and be disappointed, but hopefully still win the games anyways. It's close. It's very close. Totally different teams there, I think you can see from the 0 and the hero running back rosters. So let me know where I got things wrong, where I got things right. Hopefully you were able to get something from this exercise. Thank you very much. Please, if you made it this far, like, comment, subscribe to the video. This took a lot more time than I expected it would to get through this video. It's not quite as I imagined it, but next season, when I do something similar, I'll fine-tune the process. We'll make it even better. Have a good one. I will see you soon on the next video, which will probably be a Monday draft video, but then another topic soon. Bye-bye.